If you're lucky, you've had a pet that you love very much who you feel loves you back. Pets can be a great source of unconditional love. And it's a real loss, a tragedy, something we really mourn and grieve when they pass away, which causes a lot of people to ask, do animals have souls? Will I ever see my beloved pet again? In the afterlife? Well, I had a unique experience once that I think may answer that question for you, give you some hope. So check this out. Many years ago, I was renting a room in an apartment with a good friend of mine, and I had a pet parakeet and he had a pet cat. Obviously, birds and cats don't mix too well, but don't worry. This story, no animals were harmed in the telling of this story. Everybody's okay. Um, I would keep my bird in my room next to my computer. We keep each other company. I work on my computer a lot. And we trained my roommate's cat that he was free to wander anywhere in the apartment he wanted, except he wasn't allowed to step through the doorway into my room. My room was off limits. So we trained him. You can come up to the door, you can look inside, but you can't step inside. And what the cat would start to do after a while is he would come right up to my door, stop right there, and from there stare at my parakeet. You just sit there and stare for a while, and then he'd get bored and wander on his way. And this became like a daily habit for the cat. Sometimes multiple times a day, but usually at least once a day. And it was just like a thing, and we learned we could trust the cat. He learned, not to cross that boundary, and everybody was fine. The bird was safe, cat was fine. And then one day I moved out to California, and my roommate, my friend, stayed at the apartment in Florida. And then several weeks, a couple months later, I don't remember exactly how long it was, I'm in my new room in my new apartment in California, 2,000 plus miles across the country, working on my computer just like normal. Had my parakeet next to me like normal. And then all of a sudden, out of my peripheral vision, I feel like I'm seeing or sensing my roommate's cat standing at the entrance to the doorway of my new apartment, my new bedroom. And I look over at him and kind of like tune in. I'm like, is this my imagination? Am I actually sensing something? And I felt the cat's energy there. Like it still looked like shaped like a cat, still behaved just like the cat normally did, but it just wasn't physically there. It was just energetically there. And I actually asked him, like, what are you doing here? This is weird. Are you like astral projecting or something? What's happening? Am I just randomly imagining this for some reason? And then, after a few minutes, the cat's energy just kind of like got bored and went on his merry way. And I didn't sense him again. It was like a one-time thing. And a few days later, I happened to be talking to my old roommate, just catching up because we were friends. And he was just, how are things? Are you good? And he's like, actually, I'm not doing too well. I'm really sad. My cat actually just died a couple days ago. And I was like, wow. So I actually was seeing the cat's soul. The timing matched up perfectly. Right when his cat crossed over, I guess on his way to paradise, to the afterlife, to heaven, he made one last stop, one last visit to do what he always does and look at my parakeet. After that day, after that moment, I didn't question anymore if animals have souls, or at the very least, our beloved pets. Maybe all animals, I'm not sure, but definitely that. And since then, I've had other experiences where, one of my pets passed away and I could sense its soul visiting me. Usually it doesn't happen like forever. It's usually just the first few days or few weeks after they pass. But even now, my parakeet has since passed away, and we had really bonded. We'd become super close. Like I loved him like a best friend or a child, and we were a bonded pair. And it's been like a year now since that happened. And if I tune into him, if I want to connect to him, I I can still feel him like connect back to me from the other side. But it was like strongest when it first happened, and honestly, it was actually causing me more pain because I missed him so much, and I loved staying connected to him in spirit, and that he was still visiting me, and still, like, I could almost telepathically hear his bird song, his chirping that he normally makes, and he would kind of like fly around me and just behave like he always did. Um, but I missed him so much. I was so sad that I didn't get to be with him in person anymore. That as joyful and beautiful as it was to stay connected, it was a double-edged sword. It was also making it harder for me to mourn and grieve and release him so that I can move on. And, it was kind of keeping that wound open, in other words. And I kind of just energetically, telepathically, lovingly communicated that. And on that thought level, he understood and gave me a little more space. I stopped sensing him as much. And now it's just an occasional quick visit to say hi. Especially if, I'm really missing him or feeling lonely and I'm thinking about him, like that seems to like send a signal. But he also doesn't stay too long. It's just enough to give me comfort, but not enough to reopen any wounds, So that I don't have any way of like verifying that was actually happening and not just some coping mechanism or something. It wasn't all generated by my imagination. I don't think it was, but I like to keep a little bit of healthy skepticism with everything. Don't just believe anything just because you feel it. I like to challenge it and test it, and I want to know what's real and what's true. If it is real and true, you can test it as hard as you need to, and it'll always come up the same. But since there's no real way for me to test or verify that it felt real, I believe it does because it gives me comfort. But just full disclosure, I can't guarantee anything. But with my friend's cat, it was just a one-time thing that I sensed and saw him behaving exactly like he always did the same time he actually passed away. Not before, not after. That gave me more confidence that it was real. So I wanted to share that with you. So yes, I do believe animals have souls, or at very least our beloved pets do, and that they continue on to the afterlife, the other side. We can still connect to them energetically, and we'll see them again when we go home. There's actually been a final thought. This isn't a personal story, but I've studied a lot of other people's near-death experience stories, NDE stories. And usually when someone first crosses over, they're greeted by a loved one. It could be, depending on your life story and your age, could be a spouse who died before you or a family member. But sometimes, or, best friend, whatever. In some cases, though, like if a kid had a near-death experience, they didn't know anyone who had already crossed over that they had a strong connection with, but they did have a pet that they had a bond with, that they loved. And there's a few NDE stories where they were greeted by that pet when they first crossed over to the other side. So those stories just kind of further reinforce this idea. But again, believe what you want, take what you will. That's my story, my experience. Thanks for watching.